Hey everyone, this is CodeMarvelous with A&R Black Hats, and you're watching Deckbuilding Derezzed. On this, the first episode of Deckbuilding Derezzed, we're going to be discussing an Argus deck that I've been playing with since Order and Chaos was released. There's been a lot of discussion in the meta about how do we slow down the Eater Keyhole decks, and how do we slow down Max and the hyper-aggression we've been seeing from the runners. Well, I don't think that just piling up Taxing Ice is the best way to do it, and that's what this Argus deck is all about. It's all about making runs have additional costs in the form of tags, meat damage, and so on and so forth that make it really taxing to keyhole multiple times and impossible to keep tags off, and it punishes tags very effectively. So, without further ado, let's go look at the cards and talk about this Argus security deck and how it works. Alright, so if we're going to discuss how the deck works, we should first discuss what the identity itself does. For those of you who might not be familiar with it, Argus Security is a 45-15 Wayland identity. Its subtext is Protection Guaranteed, though that's kind of a weird title for what the identity does. When the runner steals an agenda, so it wants the runner to steal an agenda, he or she must either take 1 tag or suffer 2 meat damage. At face value, this doesn't really sound very interesting. It sounds kind of like a piddly little tax, especially when you consider that for most of the game, people were either doing enough meat damage to kill somebody or not doing meat damage at all. But I really feel that Argus Security has opened up a whole new way of doing meat damage focused around kind of a personal evolution like tax, but instead of with net damage, it's with meat damage and with tags. So with that in mind, I also love the kind of gothic looking art, right? Like the old fortress looking building. That's the Argus Security headquarters. I like it. And their flavor text is, "We never sleep." So with a discussion of what I chose to include in the deck, let's start with agendas. So par for the Wayland course, we have 3 hostile takeovers. Which really shouldn't be confusing. You don't necessarily really care about bad publicity in most Wayland decks. You especially don't care about bad publicity in this deck because you want the runner to run. Every time they run, you have an opportunity to hopefully give them a tag or meat damage if they take an agenda, or hit them with the Data Raven, which I'll discuss later. And it gives you money, which you're going to need. So, Hostile Takeover is great. It also feeds Archer, which we do include in this deck. So, Hostile Takeover, 1-point agenda. Once again, feeding into the 1,000 cuts mentality. Similar to Personal Evolution, you want a higher agenda density. This deck, for example, has 13 agendas. The Mark I version of it had 16 agendas. So, other agendas. We also have 3 posted bounties. Posted bounty is very good in this deck. For those of you who might not be familiar with it, posted bounty is a 3-1 agenda that states that when you score it, you can sacrifice it, you may sacrifice it, to give the runner 1 tag and take a bad publicity. Okay, so this is a way that we can tag actively. What I find is when I'm able to rush an agenda out, I can put this down on the table, advance it twice. If the runner doesn't run it, I can advance it 1 time, give them the tag, and then finish them with 2 Scorched Earths. Or if I've hit them with a Snare earlier, I could just put it down naked, not advance it, and then just fully advance it on the next turn for 1 victory point. The neat thing about this is it doesn't get the runner terribly close to victory. So if they steal this agenda, it's not the end of the world, and it's a 2 credit and a click NAPD if they want to clear the tag. Or it costs them 2 meat damage, so 2 cards out of their hand, or 2 power counters off of their Plascrete. All of these are good things and increases the taxing nature of this deck. The last 1-point agenda we have is Chronos Project, which is also a 3-1 agenda, and it has the text that reads, "When you score Chronos Project, the runner removes all cards in his or her heap from the game." This agenda is tremendous for Max, for Shaper recursion, Pretty much against anybody except for Criminal, where it's only kind of good because you're mostly just getting rid of events. But if you can manage to bluff one of these out and score it and put half of Max's deck into the heap before the levy hits, or maybe the levy's in the trash and it hasn't been used yet, it's magical. And any deck that requires clone chipping things out of the trash, like my Noise deck, like a lot of Shaper decks, are also going to be significantly impacted by this card. And yet again, if they steal it, they're getting 1 point in return for 2 meat damage or a tag that they have to clear or die. The next agenda that we have is 3 Project Atlases. Hopefully I don't need to belabor this too much. If you bluff this out and just score it after putting it down on the board, it's worth 2 victory points, which is great, so help you win by scoring. In addition to that, if you can rush it out and overscore it, helps get the Scorches and the money cards that you might need into your hand using the Atlas counters. Our big agendas, we have 1 Cleaners and 1 high-risk investment. Normally, people who run high-risk investment are running C-sourced. I am not. I just like high-risk investment because if I can manage to get it scored, it's a huge recovery for me if I'm behind economically, if I can just use the power counter to gain 1 credit for every credit in the runner's pool. The other 5-3 that we have is the Cleaners, which is just a fantastic for this deck because it does proc off of Argus's ID ability. So whenever you do meat damage, you do 1 additional meat damage. So now when the runner steals an agenda, they get 1 more meat damage if they choose the meat damage over the tag. And for reasons I'm going to discuss later, if they choose not to take the meat damage and take the tag instead, you're also increasing other forms of meat damage that you're giving them. So, I guess I'll talk about operations next. There's nothing really terribly surprising in this deck. We only have 9 operations that you can see here. We have hedge funds, which I'm not going to belabor why they're there. Beanstalks over other forms of burst econ because it costs 0. Your ice is very porous in this deck and you don't have a ton of it. So chances are the runner is going to land an account siphon at some point if they're running account siphon. So you need to be able to recover from 0 credits. Beanstalk Royalties helps you recover from 0 credits. That's why it's in there. The other operation we have is the beautiful, beautiful Scorched Earth. You know, Wayland's best friend. It's there if somebody digs for multiple agendas out of R&D or out of HQ, then doesn't clear the tags, you can just blast them off the face of the earth the next turn if they can't clear all the tags. So, as far as assets are concerned, we have 4 assets. We have Jackson Howard for recursion and for protection, obviously. Snares to give us another way to give tags, as you can see here, and do damage. Snares also go hand in hand with one of our other assets, which is Dedicated Response Team. Dedicated Response Team is one of the most important cards in this deck. It has one of the most beautiful pieces of art out of any card. I absolutely love it. But in addition to that, for those of you who maybe haven't seen it, because it isn't widely played except for in near-pad decks, if the runner is tagged, Dedicated Response Team gains whenever a successful run ends due to meat damage. So if this is already rezzed on the board, and the runner steals a posted bounty, now they have to choose between taking the tag, and then when they jack out, taking 2 meat damage from this card, and also having a tag that they have to clear, or taking 2 meat damage from Argus's ability and not having a tag. So they're probably just going to take the 2 meat damage. But it makes it so that they end up in a damned if they do, damned if they don't situation when they're stealing agendas. Obviously, also, Dedicated Response Team coordinates very well with Snare. If you can have these rezzed on the board behind ice that they can't easily break, then they hit that Snare out of R&D or HQ, it could potentially kill them, especially if you have the Cleaners scored. It creates an additional tax and just adjusts the runner's behavior. And that's ultimately what this deck is all about. It's all about making it so that due to Argus's identity ability, you can't run last click. Well, you shouldn't run last click anyway. But now you can't run third click because you might have to clear multiple tags. And then you need to run first or second click. And you have to be careful about the DRT. And you have to, get rid of the other assets. But there's a data raven in front of the DRT, so you're going to take a tag coming into getting it. So there's all these different things that's basically supposed to put this lattice-like structure on top of what the runner is doing, making it so that they have to play around all of the different aspects of your deck, kind of like Personal Evolution, a Jinteki deck, in that eventually you're trying to goad them into making a mistake. One thing I will say about this deck is after playing it for several weeks, it performs much better in competitive scenarios than it does in casual play. In competitive scenarios where people feel compressed, they want to play faster so that they can get to their next matchup or finish on time, people are far more likely to let this deck get under their skin, get into their head, and get them to play poorly. From an ice perspective, pretty basic stuff. We have ice walls for early protection. Enigmas also fall into that category. Our main taxers are in the form of firewalls, which slow down the keyhole decks and can be advanced to slow them down even farther. We have archers. We're running so many one-point agendas that you can easily sacrifice them for archers, which then will likely give you a scoring window if you catch somebody by surprise with them because you're trashing programs, or just create a taxing situation that Eater can't get through or Breakers can't get through, so you can rush out an Atlas or Cleaners behind it. The shining star of this deck, however, is Data Raven. Data Raven, for those of you who don't know, is a 4-cost, 4-strength Sentry with a trace that has an encounter effect similar to Tollbooth that says when the runner encounters Data Raven, he or she must either take one tag or end the run. So what this means is each keyhole run is going to give them a minimum of one tag that they're going to have to clear, which means that they're going to get 2 keyhole runs a turn if they're willing to clear tags. And if they can't break Sentry easily, if they can't break the trace, they're going to get even more tags. So it creates this great situation where you can really punish runners for running the servers that they want to. And if you couple Data Raven with Snare and dedicated response team, you can create a situation where they keyhole, they pay to get through, they take the tag from Data Raven, and then right as they're about to access, or not access, but have a successful run, you res 2 dedicated response teams, and suddenly they jack out, and they still have the tag because they don't want to take 4 meat damage from the dedicated response teams. That's the ethos of this deck. That's the idea behind it, is punish individual runs. Depending on who I'm up against and where they're focusing, I usually keep the Data Ravens on centrals. I'll put 2 on R&D and 1 on HQ. And in that way, I can just make it absurd to steal agendas. Because if you're digging with R&D interface off of the top of R&D for 2 or 3 cards, and you have to pass 2 Data Ravens to get in, that means if you steal an agenda, you're going to have 3 tags at the end of that run, or 2 tags and 2 meat damage. So it really compresses their behavior and adjusts what they have to do. The last card that I didn't mention earlier is Pad Campaign. Now, Pad Campaign gives you drip economy, but you might say, well, it doesn't really synergize with Hostile Takeover because you're going to be getting bad pub. Why would you have Pad Campaign? You're going to be making it easier to trash. You might have noticed that I'm not running C-Source. I don't have the ability to put a tag on with an operation. I find that I don't need it. I'm able to put tags on that stick other ways. What Pad Campaign does is it convinces people that I am running C-Source because it's something that they can run and trash that costs money. When you set up that kind of situation, people are very unlikely to trash Pad Campaign because they fear having less credits than you because they're worried about getting C-Scorched. So what I found with Pad Campaigns is the runner either gets super rich and then decides to trash them after a few turns, which is fine, or they stay on the board the whole game because the runner is scared to trash them and have less credits than me, which ends up giving me a huge amount of drip economy. And really, in this deck, I only need standing credits of 4. So that's the deck. I hope you enjoy it. It plays a lot like PE. You should go wide, not up. Don't be afraid to play things naked. Don't be afraid to play things and not advance them. and just bluff stuff out. You know, people are worried about traps. People are scared of data ravens. You know, a lot of times I can put a data raven in front of a Chronos project and they'll assume that it's a snare behind the data raven and will jack out and won't continue. I will say that you have to be careful with your tells, and you have to kind of make sure you're not giving away information, which is why sometimes if I had like a snare, a pad campaign, and a hostile takeover in my hand, I might just seriously in front of the runner, I might just shuffle them and then put them down as 3 remotes, not even looking at what they are. And in that way, I can give them no tells. So that if they run this one, and it's the pad campaign and they trash it, and they're like, oh, the other thing is probably an asset. They get the agenda, they have to either take the meat damage or take the tag, and then if they run the 3rd time, they're probably going to die. So it creates an interesting shell game scenario that also has the rush elements of kind of a super modern type deck, though the ice and the other things in this deck definitely do not match the super modernism deck. I hope you get as much enjoyment out of playing it as I have, but I think we finally have the first Wayland 1,000 bullets. I'll trademark that instead of 1,000 cuts strategy, where you're just whittling people down with meat damage and tags and then capitalizing on the mistakes. In a recent tournament that I took this to, that got cut short because of a state of emergency due to snow. In all 3 matchups it had before the tournament was called, I flatlined people with this deck because it compresses them into making mistakes. Alright everybody, this has been Argus Security, and this has been Deck Building Derezzed. I'm CodeMarvelous. Check us out on Facebook and our Black Hats, and on our YouTube channel, of course, but you're probably already there. You can also find me personally at self-modifyingcode.com. That's my personal blog. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.